Welcome to today's webinar on the topic of driving business transformation with talent analytics. So I'm Gillian Pillins, Research Director at CRF. I'm sure you're very familiar with how Zoom operates these days, but just as a reminder around housekeeping, we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So please do share any questions, comments, etc. in the chat. If you do want to make a comment in person, you can unmute yourself and speak freely. We are recording this session, so the recording will be available and sent out with some summary notes after the session. There's also going to be a paper that will be a brief research paper that will be accompanying this, that will be coming out at the same time. So I'd like to thank SHL for joining us today. We have a partnership between CRF and SHL, and we're really grateful for SHL's support in this session and throughout the CRF programme. Just some brief introductions. We're going to hear from the team at SHL. We've got William Black, who's a delivery consultant, who's going to be telling us all about the latest thinking of data. Mark will be talking to us about how we can move towards getting some great insights from data, and then we have Sarah McClellan, who is MD of the UK, who'll be wrapping things up for us. So let's we're going to start with a poll. We'd love to get to hear your views, hear what's going on in your organisations. So if we can fire up the poll, please, Athena. The first question we'd like to ask is really about data. So we'd like to understand, from your point of view in your organisation, where are you seeing the greatest increase in access to data? So if you can take a moment just to respond to that. So the topics we'll be covering today, we're going to start by talking about data, and then we're going to be talking about how we can overlay business insight and make sure that we're able to use data to really understand what's going on and to drive the transformation agenda. And then we're going to be talking about the cultural aspects of what it takes to successfully deploy talent analytics in the organisation. So those will be the themes that we'll be covering today. So we'll just give a moment for everyone to have a go at responding to the poll, and then we'll look at the results and see what's coming out of that. The largest area where we're seeing increases in data is in engagement and culture, 40% of responses. Second highest is around talent acquisition, in hiring and onboarding. So let's hand over to William. What do you think to those results, William?
Yeah, really interesting, actually. Just a bit of background to myself to start with. Last couple of years, I've been researching all the new kind of technology in terms of the people analytics, particularly around artificial intelligence, and a lot around people's perceptions of this kind of stuff. So super interesting to get your guys' opinion on that. It started off pretty strong on the engagement culture there. I saw then talent acquisition just popped up right at the end. I think traditionally anything to do with analytics has been quite focused on the traditional, which is probably acquisition and management. But as you guys rightly said, engagement and culture has really started to jump up. There's been lots of new things in the market around how to actually ensure that their people for companies are engaged, and start trying to quantify culture as well, and start to understand how they can use that in different ways to support the individuals and support talent strategies. So yeah, really interesting. Also interesting, there's no learning and development. I think that's probably a trend which I saw in my research as well, to say that there's almost a bit of a push to people to say actually there should be more there. There should be more applications of this new kind of analytics for support and development of people as well.
Great. So you're going to tell us some more about your research in the data space. So we're draining in data apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of thinking around data, in terms of the kind of what's been happening over the last probably decade or so, I think everyone here can appreciate that every one of us is pretty unique. We're we're all special. There's things that make us different to the person sat next to us. And therefore, thinking in simplistic terms, in terms of talent acquisition and talent management, there are therefore clearly a million kind of factors that contribute to our success or not. Despite that, quite interestingly, for talent acquisition, for predicting future performance, there's been a significant lack of actual data that we use to predict someone's performance. So when you go through a talent acquisition process in a company, it's pretty much just focused on your CV, which is obviously information that you provided, the interview, so actually having that conversation with the hiring manager. Potentially in some scenarios, there's assessment centres. There's a little bit of people going into looking at people's LinkedIns, maybe asking their previous employers, all that kind of stuff. But you can probably already kind of see, and you will have already seen, there's always going to be aspects of bias incorporated into utilising these kind of limited data sources. In terms of talent management, so actually analysing performance, people traditionally think, oh yeah, we've probably got that covered. But actually, when you think about it, in terms of most jobs, the only kind of things that we actually get insights from is probably things like loosely looking at your KPIs, manager ratings. If it's more jobs that are easily quantifiable, like sales, things like your sales performance. But again, I think it's quite obvious that these things don't necessarily actually analyze how well you're doing at your job. I used to be a salesperson, and can always have that conversation about who's actually doing the best in terms of sales doesn't necessarily correlate with who is actually trying the hardest, who's actually done the best in the context of the environment that they have been dealt with. So things such as what leads did they get, what was their market like, what were the issues around that. So again, the amount of insights that we've had has been relatively limited, and therefore there is less opportunity to actually predict success and accurately analyze success. And then when you have that kind of absence of insight, it creates a massive hole that is traditionally filled with biases, is what we've mostly found in our research. So again, it's people going on things such as looking at their CV and analysing and saying, okay, well, probably they've been to the same university that this person went to, therefore they're going to be successful. Was there any evidence there? I don't really know. And what we actually found from my research was that people particularly were concerned by that. A lot of the application of analytics and insights, when it actually comes down to it, people are just wanting to make sure they have the best opportunity to succeed, which is what we call equity. And so what's actually kind of happened over the last couple of years or so is people have identified all the fantastic stuff that's been happening in all different types of industries, utilizing things such as artificial intelligence to actually start to finally collect and quantify any kind of information or insights about an individual, particularly really unstructured information, often obscure information as well. So suddenly, even as simple as talent acquisition, when thinking about predicting success, we can suddenly identify and quantify information from a range of sources. So particularly things like artificial intelligence, looking at things like natural language processing, other things like data scraping, all that kind of stuff. And suddenly we can start to actually go into and look at things such as people's social media sites, people's facial expressions, people's tone and language, also lots about their context, their demographic data. Everything can be incorporated straight away. And then when we take it into talent management, similar things can happen. So rather than just looking at the basic kind of stuff, we can suddenly start to understand far more information about a person and the context in which their performance is actually happening. So lots of things that we can add in there from a management space as well, which works out really well. So things such as the business issues they're facing, the context of the business potentially, the things that might have happened, activity levels, loads of different things that we can finally incorporate to better understand and build a better picture of people, basically. And yeah, that's the aspects.
We've got loads more data. Presumably that helps, having that sort of ever increasing volume of data helps us make better decisions, right?
So not necessarily. Again, I think a lot of the research that we've been looking at and I've been personally doing has highlighted some of the massive issues with that. One of the best people I spoke to during the process of the conversations that I had was with some of the CEOs, some of the leading AI companies, and their kind of main concern was that when you apply things such as artificial intelligence into the people analytics space, you've got to be aware that a lot of this new technology that's been developed wasn't actually created for people analytics in mind. It wasn't created to actually be done on people. Because quite simply, most, as simple as AI literally just wants to look for correlations in information. And so you don't ever really get a good understanding of the actual causations. You always can Google things that, especially from our psychological perspectives, around correlations in the world that aren't necessarily in any way actually causing one another. And just what we're saying there's so much additional things that can happen and can impact someone's self at work that we really need to be aware of the fact that there are causations that need to be found. And again, there's companies out there that you've heard of lots of famous stories around the fact that these looking for correlations in data, such as someone's information from their CV or from Facebook or Twitter. There's loads of difficulties that can come from that. And if you're looking to try and identify if someone's future success, there's a strong opportunity or strong potential there to just exacerbate existing biases. There's a very famous CV sifting tool that a very famous company utilized. And there was suggestions that actually what it was doing was it was trying to compare CVs from past data, from past people who were successful, and put that and compare that to new people. Well, the massive challenge there was that actually, when you think about it, the people from the past, from big companies, would not necessarily have been diverse. Therefore, the CV sifting tools were simply rejecting people who, for example, were in women's hockey teams, rather than actually select people who were in men's hockey teams. That's obviously absolutely ridiculous. However, those kind of things in terms of correlations happen and exacerbate concern that we should really be aware of. There's also things such as use of obscure data as well, particularly when thinking around things like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. They're things that we haven't provided ourselves to the company. And my research fundamentally identified the fact that people were actually relatively comfortable with AI being used in acquisition, talent management, understanding their culture, development, all that kind of stuff, but only when they are aware of the data that they're providing. So if they're providing information, they're not providing information from things such as Facebook with their accepting, then they're really concerned by that, because obviously you speak to everybody. I asked my mum about this, and she said, well, I use my Facebook once every few months. How would I then get a fairly chosen for the job that I'm there for applying for? And I guess finally, there's the common things such as too much data. Even the top companies in the world for new people analytics have massive issues with having bad data coming in, and also having too much data as well. And there's always going to be a problem is when we collect all this amazing stuff, what do we actually do with it? And that actually seems to be something which concerns our clients the most, and it's actually the application of all this data. So trying to keep it more simple, but giving everyone a fair chance to succeed is something which I think is going to be the biggest highlight of the next few years for this kind of space.
Okay, so I guess one of the overriding messages is we need to take a great deal of care and think very carefully about what outcomes we're trying to achieve, and be aware of kind of unintended consequences of getting this wrong. I guess, would you have some practical suggestions in terms of how do you decide which of these new data sources are actually helpful and valid, and would be potentially better than what we historically have had available to us?
Yeah, so I guess there's probably 2 points. I hope my research highlighted the fact that for thinking about data to start with, it's important that to be aware of what your people think about it, which I said before. So that's one aspect. Just because we can collect the data from certain sources doesn't mean it's in any way valid. So I think that's probably one initial thing. But also I think what we can do, which I think a lot of people analytics and tools have started to incorporate, is to be very cautious and careful when trying to make decisions purely from the systems themselves, try and bring in the human aspect of it, try and actually enable this information to be able to have better decisions. Things such as assessments of artificial intelligence can suddenly start to analyze a huge amount of really cool context insights, which we actually need. So, they could do their own kind of pest analysis alongside every single person. They could really understand all the issues they're facing, and they can help you actually then understand and actually bring context to their performance better. So there's definitely an opportunity for us to, as humans, to bring that human touch to the insights. But I also think another massive thing we can probably do more so, particularly being kind of HR professionals, which I'm conscious a significant amount of this audience is, and being focused on people insights, is to utilize and capitalize on all the amazing things that we as psychologists, as people-centric individuals have done and have used, which is massive psychological models, things such as cognitive reasoning, personality models, emotional intelligence, really applying those models, which we know actually understand specific aspects that actually do predict success, and then using these kind of analytics and tools to better analyze those specific constructs to give us a better opportunity to actually more fairly assess people and give them a real opportunity to shine in a way that actually analyzes things that really does predict and analyze performance rather than just random correlations that you see.
Yeah, and Samantha's raised a really important point, which I think sort of connects with the next part of the conversation, which is around business insight. But it's certainly something that's come out of our research as well. That we are drowning in data, and there are so many different analyses and correlations we could potentially draw out. But how do we actually use that to get to meaningful business questions that we can look to solve, and that actually drive measurable performance improvements in performance? So the specific question that Samantha's asking is around business issues as a potential data point, but how can we really get towards having meaningful, consistent and measurable business data rather than just sort of subjective viewpoints? So I don't know if you want to pick up on this, William, or perhaps if we can go on to sort of talking about how we move more towards business insight, that I think Mark's going to be picking up on that next. Maybe Mark, you can sort of give us some suggestions and ideas about how we might tackle that particular challenge.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think that's a really good question. How do we move towards a place where we can trust the data that we have, and we can really provides insight? I think it's a really good question. I think there are a number of key ingredients to this, really, Gillian, and they are, having a really, what Will described as having a kind of human touch and kind of understanding actually what we have in terms of data, having the data available, but also asking the right questions of it and being trusting of the data that comes through. And so, I'll talk a bit later on about how I've made that work, or we've made that work at SHL for some of our clients. But it's a good question. I think we've got a poll now, haven't we? So.
Yeah, so to really to get more into the sort of the focus of what are your priorities around the sort of questions that you're trying to answer. We'd like to again get a sense from the audience in terms of what's most important to you, what you're really curious about in your organisation. So we've got a choice of 5. Which of the following would you like to be able to answer more comprehensively? And you can choose up to 3, so you don't have to just home in on one, but we'd be interested in hearing where the energy lies in the field at the moment.
Yeah, these are the sort of questions that at SHL, William and Sarah and I, we have clients ask us these questions, so it'd be really good to see what the wider response looks like. Apparently,
you're only able to choose one on the poll, so
okay.
Apologies, I think So you're going to have to, unfortunately, you're going to have to
select your favourite one. Mm.
Yeah. So we give everyone a moment just to make a choice there.
I guess I could have predicted that those two would be the top ones there. They're typically the questions that we get asked the most. It almost feels like, yeah, hidden gems and benchmarking is really hot topics with our clients. I mean, all of these, and I mentioned also to the cultural levers. So yeah, I think workforce, yeah, how does our workforce capability benchmark against other competitors, is really key. I was asked this question only on Monday. I think as HR leaders, so the HR leaders that I speak to, our clients, are really mindful that their business can feel insular, and they look inwards about the talent that they have. And actually, the smart HR leaders want to look externally at what they have, and how do the leaders that they have compare to other organizations that are similar or that they aspire to be like. So we can use the data that we have, that we derive through assessments, to help give clients that kind of view. And often that isn't a kind of one point in time view, it's multiple views. And obviously context, I think we'll mention context, that comes up as a key theme. So it's not just have we got the right talent in this organization, it's have we got the right talent to do the job that we need them to do right now. So yeah, it's a very topical question. So I think yeah, we can move on a little bit now, and I'll talk you through some examples of how this works really with clients. And I guess we're starting at a place with SHL is that we're talking to clients about data, and we're really starting from a place of separate data points. And often clients say to me things like, well, we're a really data-driven organization, but it takes some time to really work out exactly what is meant by this, because people data, as we're referring to, it's not always clear, where that data is, what that data actually means. It can be quite messy data. And so as occupational and business psychologists, we need to be really mindful that, our clients are on a journey with this, and this is still fairly new stuff. And HR data isn't as clear cut as operational data or as balance sheets. So, as Will said, that kind of human touch is really important to say, actually, this is a data point and this is what it represents. And actually, this is what it means about your people or the people that you want to bring into the organization. So yeah, as I say, it's starting from a point of separate data points. And we're collecting data all the time through the processes, the assessment or processes that we have with clients, and so it's really about using the right using the right tools and really understanding where this data comes from, but also representing that through the right kind of models or representations, so that actually we can make some really informed judgments about people. So yeah, I guess using some of these examples here, if we're looking for people with high potential, there would be a data point there that might ask the question, is she a leader of the future? Does she have the right abilities to lead the organization? And we might have some data points around that, but actually how motivated will she be if we put her into this role? Is this the right point in time? So connecting the data points and starting on a journey to really understand where this information has come from, how we can interpret it, and what insight that it can give us. And I guess we can't really consider this to be kind of true insight, because there are all these other data points that are kind of around at the same time. So really true insight, I guess, is where it's coming, where it becomes a lot more interesting, is where we're doing what at SHL we refer to as kind of holistic people insight. So it gets much more interesting at this point, because we're combining data points, and we're at a point where we can ask like really key questions that might predict outcomes. So typically, and I know we're using the term now a lot, workforce analytics. I know that you use that term, Gillian, and actually, workforce analytics starts from a place of where we can really understand what the business challenges are. So it's no longer in the domain of the business psychologist or the HR leader. And so what starts as quite kind of common questions as, have we got the right people in the business? So a really broad question. And actually, we can start to be more nuanced with these questions. And we can say, have we got the right people at this point in time, or for these challenges that we're going to face tomorrow? What do we need to develop in these people? And actually, if we do that development, how do we measure that outcome? How do we measure that actually that we're going to achieve what we need to do? So I guess this is holistic people insight. And analysis skills and understanding is required for this, but we can't ensure that everyone's an expert. So our clients, need to have, we need to make sure that we're interpreting that information in the right way, and we're really kind of clear on where this data comes from, as well pointed out, and what it actually means for people. So I guess that's the journey that we need to move on with.
Mark, I guess an interesting question. You talk about building a model against which you're measuring, and it strikes me in this, when we're talking about data, you can compare today with what you've had in the past, but the challenge is knowing what we need for the future. And you talk about this, and some of the questions we might be looking to answer would be. What are some of the behaviours that we need for future success? But I wonder if you can sort of give us an insight into how you might go about building that model, and bringing in the sort of future business strategy and the future need to measure against that, to determine whether we have the people today that we need for that future success. Yeah,
and I think that probably a really good example of this is that we're going to talk to now that example that I have with in the case study that we've written up recently with a client I'm really lucky to work with, Nationwide Building Society. So I think exactly as you're saying, Gillian, there's this having this model, this kind of robust model. There's I guess there's some key ingredients for success here, and it's having a kind of a robust model for assessment. So kind of understanding actually what tools we're going to use, and what processes that it supports. And in the case of Nationwide, it would be their model of potential. So so not an understanding what potential means in the organisation, and then it's having a sizable amount of data to work with. So gathering data up, as just saying, through the various assessment processes. And Nationwide have been doing this for a number of years, with us, gathering assessments for recruitment and development. So when we carry out analytical work together, then it goes further than just a generalization or a trend. And it also, we can finally, be curious about what questions to ask that data. So as you're saying, Gillian, actually, we might have a competency profile, a competency model, a leadership model. But actually, if we ask different questions of that data, like, who do we need for, to rise against the challenges that we've had for this year, example, in terms of the business changes that we're facing. Who is going to be the right leader for tomorrow and for next year? And so, there's ingredients of, having the right assessment data, having a right amount of it, then, yeah, finally being really curious about those, so asking the right questions. And we're really fortunate at SHL that Nationwide, a client that can really ask some of those key questions. And simply it might be, as you say, like a benchmarking exercise to look at. Some clients just want a kind of benchmarking exercise to look at actually what do their leaders look like for the future. And how do they compare, more broadly with other organisations that they might compare to or aspire to. And with Nationwide, we can present, we present this information back to them, and with other clients, we can, we dashboard this information. And I guess, some of the answers with Nationwide that are really, really helpful are around, just really understanding, a bit more about their leaders. So, we know that they have some really promising leaders that are, twice as likely to apply, big picture thinking. And that's really important, in the challenges that the organisations face. So the assessment data can tell us that, and it can tell us where they are in the organisation and, what development areas there might be as well.
I think one of the conclusions from our research around the analytics space is it's really important. It's not just about understanding the data, but it's about what different business decisions does that insight then lead to. So that's I guess what's interesting is to understand how do organizations take that, and then what does that lead to in terms of different behaviors? So are they then looking for different leadership criteria, for example, or rejigging strategies around leadership development, or there might be tangible actions that result from that. And I think that's often the challenge with analytics, is you can end up getting really tied up in lots of interesting questions, but it really has to tie back to specific tangible actions that have an impact on your business.
And that's exactly where that insight needs to go to drive development programs, to identify who needs to be on leadership programs, and they're really key at the moment. And so whether the talent exists in the organization, or whether we need to look externally to bring people on to fill the gaps that we don't have, where you have really, where you have volumes of data to look at, it's, knowing that actually, in one area of the business, there might be some, really a pocket of talent, and actually they could be deployed elsewhere. And actually those competencies and those strengths and those, they could be deployed externally, in a different part of the organization. So so where you have those key ingredients of, the right tools, the right volume, and asking the right questions, you can really drive those business, drive that business insight and make the key decisions.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. I mean, I think we sort of talk about what it takes to do this well. I mean, I think there are all sorts of challenges. You need to have good data. You need to have people who are capable of dealing with this, but you also have to have the right sort of data-driven culture, which is a theme that's kind of come up again and again. So Sarah, I think that's where you've been doing a lot of thinking, and perhaps have some insights to share around taking a sort of bigger picture around this as an HR function, for the function, and perhaps for the organisation more broadly. What can we do to sort of nudge in the right direction around culture?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi everyone. So yeah, we've talked around the explosion of data and the opportunity to use that in an insightful way. But I think that the next step is then how do we really build a culture? How do we bring this into our day-to-day ways of working, making decisions, build a much more analytics-led way of working? And before we just jump to the content, I think we're going to ask you guys a question again. So if you can just take a moment to quickly tell us about the challenges that you're facing. So what are the things that are actually blocking you, or that you're having to overcome in terms of actually building a talent analytics led culture? And then we'll have a quick chat around the themes that are coming through. We have said you can select your top 2. I'm not sure if the technology will allow you to do that, but if you can't select 2, then go for the one that's the biggest challenge.
I think one of the aspects of culture, Sarah, is it's important to have a culture of experimentation, and
Indeed.
That
Indeed.
yeah. Just while we're waiting to complete the poll, we've got a comment from Vikrant. So the question is whether there are any specific data sets around talent management. So we interrogate with leaders in business and people in culture on aspects of talent management, but do we have a sort of common view of what data we should be looking at when we're talking about talent management specifically?
Of specific data sets. So I suppose the opportunity we have now is huge. As William was saying, you know, we are collating data in so many different ways. We have information now, you know, in sometimes about what people are doing with their time at work. You know, wearable devices are sort of becoming more popular. I'm sure if you're an Outlook user, then you might have noticed, like me, that I'm now getting a weekly email that tells me how much time I spend in meetings, how much time I have available, who I collaborate with, which is quite interesting, but equally quite worrying in terms of, you know, the information that is being collated. So I suppose that the challenge is there is so much. What is helpful is really, you know, validated, proven measures of people and their potential, surveys and tools that have been constructed in a well-researched and considered way. But equally, you know, now that we can access different types of data, it's not necessarily, you know, completely excluding those, but thinking about and evaluating the merits, the pros and cons of that type of data, the ethics around how has it been collated. So very much, you know, we have the potential now with these broader data sets to look at different combinations of things around behaviours, potential, performance, engagement, pulse surveys becoming much more frequent and important. So I think the opportunities are vast. The challenge we have now, which is what we'll talk around shortly, is just how do we navigate that? How do we make sense of it so that it isn't overwhelming?
Yeah.
And it looks like we've got the results in.
Got the results of the poll. So top 2, lack of technology is the number 1, which is cited by nearly half of people, and the next one is limited expertise, which so it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's interesting that it has gone to the things that we need. So technology, systems, how do we actually collate all of this information, and limited expertise. So I think probably we're obviously seeing lots of organizations start to build people analytics departments, expertise, but we need that expertise not just to be within one department or function, but actually filtering throughout the organization. I expected potentially more blockers to come around the sort of bias side, you know, ethics, concerns around AI and algorithms sort of running away, you know, as we've heard in the press so many times. But I can see how technology is something that, you know, we really need to grasp and get systems and platforms in place as quickly as possible. Otherwise, that data is there, but it's not reachable, and it's not connected to what we're trying to achieve. And interestingly, across the course of the last year or so, 18 months, so many providers have appeared, and actually that's the direction that SHL is heading, is how can we actually make it easier to collate and to connect data points in a meaningful way, so you don't have to go to all of these separate systems, separate platforms. So yes, interesting to see that coming through. And I think now we're gonna move to talk around why it's so important for organisations to be enhancing their approach to analytics. Why is the time now, do we think, to do that? We've been using this visual actually as a way of helping to articulate just how much evolution, constant change there is in our lives right now. And I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that this year has really helped us understand what disruption really feels like, and it certainly feels that ambiguity, that change, that uncertainty and complexity is really going to continue. And coupled with that, we've got the data exploding, so we have huge potential to understand our people in a more objective way, and not just what they can do, but what they could do in different contexts, different environments. And also we know that organizations, I'm sure many of your organizations, are becoming less linear, they're becoming more matrixed, agile teams. So even the way we set up and organize ourselves as businesses, as teams, is much more fluid. So we've almost got these kind of spinning discs. Our universe or our ecosystem doesn't stay still, and therefore we really need that valid people data, people insight to help us find those moments of alignment that Mark actually was talking around in relation to Nationwide, but we've seen it with many other customers and clients too, that I need to find a leader who can lead us through a crisis. Who is going to be that best person? I want to find a way to look at fit to scenario and fit to context, and that person might be different to the person who is currently leading that function or leading that team, or maybe I want to shift the positioning of my organization from telecommunications to broader technology, and therefore I need to understand how the capabilities of my people benchmark against a different sector within the marketplace to give me that insight, so then I can line up my people with that opportunity and start making steps towards that transformation. So really what we're seeing is this move towards data being so valuable if we can connect it and use it in the right way, and to your points as well around needing the technology that enables us to do that in an intuitive way. So yeah, this is sort of how we're starting to depict how things are moving and evolving so much, and needing the data to help us see those moments of alignment. And I suppose from an individual point of view, so if we move on to the next piece, it's not just organizations that this is important for. So organizations obviously have more clear ambitions now around being objective and future focused. They've got to keep an eye on where they might go next, how they might need to transform their business models, transform their organizational design to capitalize on opportunities and thrive. They want to be in a position that means they can enable and empower people to feel safe. As you were saying, Gillian, psychological safety, feeling trusted, feeling empowered to experiment, to learn and to grow. So there's sort of greater clarity, I think, in terms of what many organizations are searching for from a visionary point of view. For individuals, and this is where the importance of that data for an individual really comes to the fore. Generally, research has aligned around saying what individuals really want is a meaningful personal experience at work. They want to find connection with their organizations, not just in a, well, this job pays me some money and helps me live my life and do the things I want to do. That's important. But also what's coming through stronger and stronger is that broader connection to society and the role that we can play in moving things forward. They also really want to be fairly evaluated and understood for their strengths, their capabilities, not just now, but what they could potentially do tomorrow. So that unbiased and inclusive view is becoming ever important. And the great thing, I think, for all of us about humans, about individuals, is that we can reinvent and we are very resilient. And I think that this year in particular has shown us that in spades. So, you know, when you think back to that earlier diagram we had about the lenses, the circles constantly rotating, actually the great news here is that individuals, if we can find the right opportunity, if we can give them the support and development that they need, then they can learn new skills, they can adapt, and they can evolve. So what we're talking a lot about at SHL now is how this people insight or talent analytics or data can provide us that really strong bridge between individuals and organizations and enable us to chart the way forward. And we've been working with a number of organizations on this journey. Nationwide is one of those, and starting to answer broader questions. So I think, you know, with data becoming more readily available, organizations are looking at things around how can we democratize access to development? How can we build talent marketplaces so that individuals and managers and leaders are making connections, and almost this ecosystem is evolving and thriving itself. We've talked quite a lot about the power of purpose in building that connection, because, you know, where there is alignment, where there is understanding about where we could go and what it means, and you know, that connection that can really help us see the way forward in a world that is ever changing and ambiguous. So yes, you know, that connection, that bridge, we're seeing more and more can be really, really powerful.
Okay. We've got a very practical question that's come up, which is around, you know, in a multinational organization, that your ability to collect data in different geographies can differ depending on, you know, local laws and you know, availability of technology and all number of other factors. But just wonder if you have any advice there. I guess you can go with a minimum number of consistent data points that you can gather across the piece, or, you know, you can have a slightly, you know, in some areas you might have more detail than others. You know, if we're looking to get sort of consistent view of data across the whole organization when you're operating across multiple geographies, do you have any practical tips on how we might?
Yeah, no, it's a big area, a big question. So yeah, it certainly is something that we have done at SHL and do. So we work with a number of multinational organisations, and obviously you do need to be aware, you know, 100% from the outset of the different legal requirements of GDPR in Europe, obviously, and other jurisdiction and regulations. There is, I mean, without going into all the intricacies of all of that, there are ways forward, and there are ways to manage that. And I think a lot of it starts with, you know, making sure that you are upfront with the participants, the employees that you're talking to, that you're asking to complete assessments, or that you're asking to access their data, and that you are being clear with them around how that is going to be used, what the purpose is for. So there are some complexities absolutely to navigate, but there's definitely a way through that. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add something to that.
I was going to really echo exactly what you were saying there, Sarah, and actually it's about being planful when you start on this journey. So actually, you know, we know that we're going to encompass some challenges along the way in order to access certain data under these, you know, different organizations. So actually, you know, being mindful of kind of business processes and of what we need to do to use that data. But, you know, as Sarah said, you know, as long as we're, you know, upfront in what we're asking, then those processes tend to be a lot smoother. So yeah, that's
so
that's an important
transparency
point.
is a very important.
And it goes straight into that kind of other big question around candidate experience, isn't it? So actually, how do you inform the people that maybe going through an assessment process how things work?
Yeah. Okay. And another issue, a similar issue really raised by Sophie is having enough data, sufficient volume of data points for stakeholders to see the benefits. And I guess in a way that where you can come in, because not only do you have data related to a client, but you can make those comparisons across a broader population that can offer some insight and comparison.
Those are the two kind of ways of thinking about that particular challenge. Is that yes, as SHL we collect billions of data points, assessment data points, so we're able to do that external comparison piece, which answers that benchmarking question that came up earlier. But actually, there is also a challenge of how much do we need to make start answering some of the more straightforward questions about data. And I think that's really about setting up the process and in the beginning kind of working out what do you need, what questions really you need to ask in the coming months. But yeah, it's about being prepared and planning.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of summarize a little as well, it doesn't have to be that huge daunting project to start with. So actually, I think to your point, Mark, you can start small, but if you start with something that is meaningful for the business and can get the stakeholders that in the business and within HR on board from the start, that's when you can start to gain momentum. So you can go back and show some of the impact and build from there. But our sort of takeaway messages would be around it's really there's great opportunity. I think there's so much data out there. We're working virtually, which means we're collating even more data than ever before. So thinking about the quality inputs, as William was saying, you really do. If it's rubbish in, then you're going to get rubbish out. So they've got to be good inputs. We've got to think about how we can build meaningful insights. So data, reporting data on its own, as I'm sure as you all know, that doesn't give us a huge amount. We have to connect it to a business issue. And now I think what's exciting is we have this chance to look at how we can use data about people in a more predictive way. So it actually helps us back to that point around meaningful insights. So the more we invest now in building these sort of people insight or people analytics hubs that give us access to data, that we still overlay with a human view, that we make sense of it. We don't just allow things to run, but we're thinking back to the core question that we're trying to ask and the answers that are being suggested and interpreting them for individuals and for the business. Taking steps today I think would be really beneficial to enabling you to get those moments of alignment between individuals and organizational needs.
Great, well, fantastic. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure we could go on and on, but we are sadly out of time. But I'd just like to thank Sarah, Mark, and William for sharing these insights with us today. We will be sharing the team's contact details, so please do follow up directly with Sarah, Mark, and William if you'd like to further the discussion. As I say, we'll be sending out post-meeting notes with a summary and a recording of this, and also a summary research paper that CRF and SHL have developed together, which really focuses on this, on how we identify those critical business issues and make sure that we get meaningful insights that lead to key actions and performance improvement. So just to say thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.